Wait, say that again. I was saying, because I might put this in an intro. Okay, wait, I was saying I don't have executive functioning, but I don't like that phrase. And then what were you saying?
I was saying that phrase is picking something out, is describing something
what is
that's
that
real.
Something?
I don't know. A set of capacities and powers, but executive just makes me think of like corporations.
Paper pushers with little pens, embossed pens.
Yeah, or the idea that there's like a little person inside you, the homunculus, that's in charge of all the other bits of you, and that you yourself should think of yourself as like at the top of a hierarchy. I don't like that, because I think we just are the whole, like we are the peons as well as the CEO.
My favorite, I'm sure I've talked about this before, but it's so interesting to me. I'll talk about it again on the podcast. My favorite biblical exegesis that was brought to my attention was that, you know, there's this preoccupation with perfection, I feel, you know, perhaps in our culture.
Oh, yes.
That somebody once said to me that came from, because Christ says, like, be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, then actually that was a mistranslation. Actually, you're exactly the person to ask about this.
Well, do you have a Greek New Testament? Mine's in my office. So
yeah. Okay, well, I should actually introduce the show, and then we can get more into this.
Okay.
So, hi. My name is Francesca. Welcome to Critical Babe Theory. This is Dhananjay Jagannathan.
That's me.
Professor of philosophy from Hunter University, part of CUNY, the larger system. Also an essayist and a thinker at large. Yeah.
Excellent description. Thank you.
Yes,
Very
of
kind.
course. And somebody who knows Greek, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you could answer this question, because I am going to carry this whole thing through because I like a discursive thought. So if Christ says, be ye perfect, like your Father in heaven is perfect, but actually it's not perfect, but whole, be ye whole, would you agree with that translation or no?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the Greek.
Okay. So
yeah, I mean, there are words that correspond to those two different notions, and the word for perfect, teleos is the adjective, often at the end, complete, in the sense of being finished.
There we go. To me, that seems very distinct from the concept of perfection, which is a little bit tight and prescribed.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe the word has just drifted, that perfect originally meant something more like finished. And now it means something like maximum, like the most.
Yeah.
But I think that says more about our culture than it does about our language.
No, surely. I mean, I think the idea of perfection is problematic culturally.
Yeah. But it also gets what a human being is wrong. Like, we're in the middle of things. That's just what it is to be us.
So you're saying Christ got people wrong?
No, but if to have a perfect will is to never give in to temptation or sin, never even to feel temptation, perhaps. There's one sense in which we can aspire to that standard and one sense in which we can't, right? We are human, and so we feel the temptation, but we can't let ourselves off the hook for giving into it either. So we're always held to that standard. That standard is always there for us. But what we are as human beings, and this is something that Christian ethics really gets right, is we're in the middle. We're pilgrims, and part of that pilgrimage is that we have to struggle and overcome not just the bad things in the world, but the bad things in us.
Sure. That sounds great.
Yeah.
But here's my question. Would Christ admonish us to be something we could not?
That would make him imperfect.
Which I've been thinking about a lot lately. This is not the topic of this conversation, but we will get there to the topic. But I've been thinking about, did I talk to you about this? This is the problem with also talking all the time, which is like I can never remember who I'm talking about what with, and I'm always developing my ideas. I'm sure it's very obnoxious on an interpersonal level, although it does seem to sort of function for this medium in general. But I've been thinking about when Christ says, Father, my Father, why hast thou forsaken me? When he's on the cross. And I was canvassing a few different people about whether they'd ever, like whether that ignited anything in them, you know, because I hear those lines. And for me, I'm like, oh, the whole emotional landscape and scene is like painted. immediately, right? I think I know what that feels like. I guess we'll start from there. What do you think about that? Do you relate to that phrase?
Oh, I mean, it's extraordinary. It's one of the most powerful moments in the scriptures.
I would completely agree. But to me, that moment, because what I was thinking is I was like, okay, so if this whole idea is that if I build my house on rock, right, that it'll stand and I can have a whole foundation for my entire life. If I have a God-centered life, then I have a foundation for my life. But if Christ was asking his God, his Father, saying like, why have you abandoned me? One might be led to believe that God is not totally dependable if his own son found him lacking. So is it that God is not all-encompassing and dependable, or is it that Christ had to feel himself with the vulnerability of like an abandoned child in order to become fully human?
Surely it's the latter. We have to say that, don't we? I don't know. I'm not very... my theology is very much at the amateur level.
But it is an interesting question that I think about. And this idea of like, is it the possibility of abandonment that makes us fully ourselves? Do you know?
Yeah, I think that's connected to this idea of being pilgrims, right? That we are alienated from something that ought to belong to us, that ought to be ours. And this life is not quite a life in which we can be at home in. So I think that idea of home is connected to this idea of our parents taking care of us. Totally.
Which I guess gets us to the topic in a very tenuous way, which is like this right to something, which some people might say like a right to education, right? So what I wanted to talk today about is, I was reading all of your work. I mean, sorry, this is specifically in the context of what universities have been like since post October 7th, which is something you've written about. And have you also spoken about it publicly? Or I guess that is the version of an academic speaking publicly, is writing things.
I've talked about it at a pretty generic level, but not gotten into specificities.
I didn't find your writing generic.
No, I mean, in the writing, I think I'm much more specific.
Okay.
Because I like to be careful. And so, not because I was necessarily fearful. I mean, in some of those essays, I'm trying out ideas about what I think about the nature of universities and what the last couple of years have shown us. But when sensitivities are high, I feel an obligation to be more careful. And so I'm willing to, well, this is the essayist's cover, isn't it? Right? I get to figure my ideas out and then only later put them out into the world. And there can be a kind of timidity in that.
You mean as opposed to what I'm doing, which I'm just like spewing ideas constantly, half-baked all over the internet? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know I was thinking about, because I think I was reading some of your writing and you quoted at the very end Ecclesiastes, like everything is wind, vanity of vanities. And I often think about, in other cultures, people who talk a lot are like, I'm just thinking of like older cultures. People who talk a lot are considered like they're making all this. I remember reading some folktale about the women who made all this wind with their mouth, meaning like they just talked too much, and how there was a lot of judgment around that. And that talking a lot was seen as like a sign of weakness and weakness of character. Anyway, I was sort of trying to ponder whether I thought that held up in today's modern society.
There's a word that I like for this, logorrhea.
Logorrhea,
yes.
Yeah, so I would never self-diagnose as having logorrhea, but it's a distinct possibility. And I don't know if it's better. Is it better and more esteemable to stay silent and mysterious and not play out your ideas upon the world, perhaps?
I don't know. I think, like I said, I think there's a risk of a kind of caution that comes with just sitting behind your desk and taking your time over things. And even when I look back on last semester, the spring, when I was a columnist for the Columbia Spectator, and I had the freedom to write every 2 or 3 weeks roughly. Of course, events were happening so fast that even that time scale made it hard to kind of respond to them in a thoughtful way. And I felt some obligation because I had these column inches. Well, it's not really a concept anymore. I had this portion of a webpage, to have a voice about the issues from the faculty perspective. And I thought I should use them wisely, but I should also use them to actually respond to the urgent things that were happening. And I didn't feel like I always lived up to that. And that's something I struggle with. But I think more conversation helps you develop the virtues of conversation. So logorrhea is one possibility if you never learned anything from talking to people. But if you don't try out your ideas, if you don't get in the habit of talking to a wide range of people, then you start to grow inward in a way that I think is a risk.
Sure, totally. Makes me think of like what were they called? The Great Generation?
The silent generation?
Not actually. No? I was hearing somebody talk about this, but yeah, that would be an even better example. The silent generation, where people just didn't talk about anything, and then aghast were looking at as the world, their children's world, was changing around them. Anyway, I feel like it would be good to start closer to the beginning. How did you decide? What was your background? How did you decide that you wanted to get into academia?
I grew up in an academic family. I had an aunt and uncle who taught for decades at Mount Holyoke College in Western Massachusetts, and another uncle who's a professor at Beloit College. So these little American liberal arts colleges. And I had a kind of idyllic picture of what life as a academic was. You know, these small, intense communities, places that people spent a large period of their lives in if they were on the faculty. And if they were students, they might spend the time there, but they tended to get pretty attached and they come back. And so these networks of alumni and the sense of the university as a kind of strongly bonded social institution. And I'm not saying I had that idea when I was a child, but it's what I experienced.
Sure.
When we went to visit. Especially, I remember visiting Mount Holyoke when I was 5 years old. It would have been September of 1992. And I remember the fall colors. I remember how beautiful the campus was. But I also had the sense that this was something magical. A kind of Hogwartsy feeling, I guess. And I wanted to be part of that. And, as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a teacher of some kind, maybe a college professor. For a long time, I thought I wanted to be a math professor. And I was a math major until I read Plato, and then things haven't been the same ever since.
And you focus specifically on Aristotle, right? Am I wrong?
In my academic writing, I'm primarily an Aristotle scholar.
Okay. And you went to undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin, and you had a great experience there?
Yeah, I had a liberal arts experience. I was part of the liberal arts and sciences honors program, and so I had to take these classes on topics that I wasn't already interested in. That wasn't true in the university as a whole, and if I had gone somewhere else and the things that I thought I was interested in when I was 18 were mathematics and linguistics, and I thought I liked formal stuff, like things you could put into equations. And in the rest of my time, I was thinking about a range of other questions and issues, like I was somewhat politically active. There were a lot of political issues that were important to me at the time, but especially the war in Iraq, which kicked off when I was in high school. And I had the sense of a kind of collective madness. And I also had the sense that I didn't have that much right to say anything about it because we were permanent residents by then, but I wasn't an American citizen until 2007.
Wait, so where were you born?
India, New Delhi, India. My parents they left India when I was 3 and moved to Jamaica. And I lived in Kingston, Jamaica until I was 9, and then we moved to the US.
Oh, fun. Just side note, anecdote. I was in this big group of people, and there was this guy talking who was a white dude. But I was listening, and he had a really heavy Jamaican accent. And then I was like, I can't be here. I'm pretty good with accents because of my job. And then he said he was from Jamaica. And I was like, I have never seen a white dude with a Jamaican accent before.
I think I was quite a spectacle when we arrived in Texas when I was 9 years old.
Oh, you had an accent.
I had an accent. I think my memory of this period isn't that great, but I assume that it was Jamaican, maybe recognizably so. This is just a couple years after Cool Runnings, and so I feel like everyone, even kids, knew what that was.
Yeah, totally loved that movie.
But I lost it.
Yeah, I can tell. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's a general. Oh, interesting. Okay, but you were saying that because you did not have you were not a citizen, you just were a permanent resident, you didn't feel like you had am I wrong? Did you just say I didn't have a right to speak to the issues?
No, I did feel like I had a right, but I didn't feel like I always had the standing, because being an American was a question for me.
Yeah.
And I remember, when my family kind of went through the process of acquiring a citizenship together, and I remember feeling kind of down on the American project, such as it is at that time, because of the war and the Bush administration and all of that. And I thought, no, this is my country, this is my home, that's something I've written about, and I love this place and I care about this place, and it doesn't have to be perfect to be lovable. And one way of loving it is to try to make it better. I mean, it's all very romantic stuff, but it was a live decision for me. Did I want to take that oath of citizenship?
And how old were you?
I was 20.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this was like you were cogent.
Yeah, I was cogent. Well,
Your frontal lobe wasn't fully developed, but close enough.
Yeah, especially men, right? It's,
I don't know.
Very marginal.
Tell me.
I've heard this. I don't know if this is true, that there's differences in cognitive development, especially around risk-taking behavior, that, a lot of, like, a huge portion of the crime that happens
yes,
because
I've heard
of
about
young
that.
men between 16 and 25 because they basically have no impulse control yet. It's one of the factors. And if we could just sort them out in that period, then things would...
But I have almost no risk control either.
This is a statistical generalization. But at any rate, I was politically active, and I was interested in civil liberties because of the Patriot Act. And I remember getting my little card from the ACLU so I could tell people I was a card-carrying member of the ACLU. And I was also very motivated by the death penalty and I grew up not very far away from the federal and state prisons in Huntsville, Texas, and it's just a killing complex, basically. And all of this, this is the 90s and 2000s, where the Actual Innocence Project was showing that a lot of people who were on death row, were put there under very questionable circumstances, and the sense of this kind of injustice happening just down the road felt very disturbing to me. And then, of course, what we were, as a country, perpetrating in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East. And I didn't have an intellectual framework to put any of that in. I was just curious about it, and I would read the newspaper, and I would talk to people about it. I'd talk to my parents and friends and other people that I knew. And it was, of all things, believe it or not, when I read Plato that I realized, these are questions that have been around for a long time. They're questions that have a history, that are connected to the study of this thing. And I didn't know what this thing was yet, but, you could do it. You could read the stuff as literature and think about the significance of the literature, do classics. You could see it as part of the history of political thought and how authors like Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas have influenced modern political philosophy, which influences things like the American founding, which influences how we think about these questions about freedom and justice and moral education and all the rest. Or you could think about it as connected to the history of philosophy, so connected to other questions in the study of philosophy, which I didn't quite know. I didn't know what that was yet. But I had the sense that there were people at the university who were engaged in studying these questions. I could see the people just a few years older than me, like the graduate students who were, embarking on a study like that. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to study this stuff because I wanted to fit together my academic interests with these other things that mattered to me. Which
I think brings me to the question, when I was doing some background research and reading your work, I was thinking about, what is education for? And, something that you had won, I want to call it an op-ed, but that's probably not what it was. You have one article where you're calling for the next president of Columbia University to be this was before Lee Bollinger. No, it was after Lee Bollinger. Who was the president? So full disclosure, does this matter? I went to Columbia University. And you taught there for how many years?
I taught there for 8 years.
8 years.
Until this past spring.
Until fairly recently. And you have this one essay you wrote saying that you believe the next president of Columbia, of the university, should be a humanist, which I think to me sounds tied into this question of what is education for? So in your estimation, what is a liberal arts education for? What is it supposed to do for both its students and for society?
In its best version, a liberal arts education is an expansion and an ennobling of the mind. And recognizes that there are lots of things that knowledge is useful for. It's really great that we have engineers who are expert in engineering, and my father's an engineer. And it's great that we have people who work in the legal professions who know a lot about law and so on. And of course, students, when they're at university, are expecting that this will launch them on a certain kind of career trajectory. But the idea of liberal education is that the disciplines are connected to each other, that what they study, what they offer is understanding, knowledge that leads to understanding, the way seeing the way that things fit together more broadly, and that each of these disciplines, of course, has a history, a set of objects that's of interest to it, or a set of questions that motivate it. And seeing the world more fully requires being able to take on those different kinds of intellectual perspectives. And so a kind of education that channels you to study one thing, to master it, and then to address yourself just to what you might call technical issues that come up. How do I solve this engineering problem? How do I address this legal case? That's ultimately a kind of narrow perspective on human experience, which plays into it. So let me give you an example. If we had architects who had thought a great deal about the aspirations of human beings in the way that literature and music and art represent, and philosophy, I think we'd be better off. Because
Okay, sorry, let me restate that to make sure I understand. So if people who are trained as architects also had a wider lens on how to like be more, I have a hard time when people, okay, this is just how my brain works. Do you know when people are like, you're my favorite human?
Yeah.
I'm always like, why are they saying that? It's like the colloquial usage of human drives me absolutely bananas.
I don't like the word person, and that seems like the alternative. So I kind of understand
People?
You're one of my favorite people. Sounds normal.
Well, yeah, you're my favorite person. You're my person. That's also kind of cloying. But like whenever, there was a period that's not like maybe 2 years ago where I felt like every other Instagram post was like, these are my favorite humans. My favorite human. And anyway, this
Stylistically,
is
it's not great.
Just drove me freaking insane. But I'm going to use it right now.
Go for it.
So ideally, would our architects have received an education that expanded their purview so that they were also learning about how people could become more human?
Yes. And then we'd have more humane architecture, and that would be good. So that's the benefit to society.
Okay.
I also think it's the reason for an individual to pursue it is that this is a good way to be.
Why, though? I guess this is what I want to get down to. Why is it better to be engaged? Because the idea here would be that engaging with literature and philosophy and art would make
and foundational science as well.
Okay.
I think it's important to learn about. I had to take a class in modern physics for my great books education. I had to take logic, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So a well-rounded individual that makes for better character, and thus better characters. Like
if only I
because
it doesn't make people better people. That's important to me.
So then why? Then who frickin' cares? Because maybe we just need like plumbers who want to serve God. Do you know what I mean? Do we really need philosophy majors who want to achieve in liberal society? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of work you end up doing. I mean, I think the trades are noble professions as well, and maybe it doesn't make a great difference to the plumber's plumbing, whether they've had a liberal education or not. But I think it makes a difference to their lives. That they, in particular, under the conditions that most of us work, we can't get a great deal of fulfillment from our jobs. And so it's important that there be other sources of aspiration for us. And if you don't have the ability to devote yourself all day to those kinds of endeavors, then it's great when you can enjoy a book and enjoy art and all the rest.
There was this one quote that really struck me from one of your writings, which was you talk about how we should defend the spiritual worth of a liberal arts education, which it sounds like that's sort of what you're pointing at right now.
That is, and I hadn't used that language before in my writing about education. In that essay, I try to say that there's a spiritual benefit because there's a set of spiritual goods, namely truth, knowledge, goodness of some kind, the excellence, generally, beauty. These are all things that are spiritual in character in the sense of not themselves inhering in the material dimensions of the material world. This is how you are learning that I'm not an Aristotelian, but in fact a Platonist.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I, of course, and I think you do too, have a certain explanation of how things have that, why things have that spiritual character. But I think it's actually something that everyone can sense. Like you, when you enter one of those soulless glass and steel buildings, office buildings or what have you, you have a sense of a kind of spiritual deprivation. And we use words like soulless. Mm-hmm. And so that's the kind of register in the language that there's kind of a public language around. Maybe we talk sometimes about things being humane or human, but I think talking about them as lacking or having a spiritual dimension is actually something that we can.
Sure. I'll say that I don't know that I have ever darkened the door of any glass and steel structure, so I'm going to have to just go on
Oh, sure you have.
Here.
I mean, Lerner Hall on the campus of Columbia University.
It just felt like stuffy and smelled a little bit like old cheese in there to me. That was kind of my main takeaway.
That's the one modern building on the campus. But
yeah,
there's
what is the Chinese group that was opposed to the Communist Party, but then it was just found out that they were actually kind of operating like a cult, and they always do. Anyway, they had a big banner there. That's literally all I can remember. Falun Gong.
Yeah.
Am I thinking about the right culty thing?
I don't know, one way or the other.
Okay, so that's alleged.
Alleged.
But that's what I think about when I think of learn. Okay, but I guess look, I'm obviously in your boat. I mean, I studied classics at Columbia, and I love literature. But I guess I just wonder, because in another article of yours, you talk about like teaching the 1%ers, right? Which is like, but the people who are able to have this maybe this is good. The people who get this like humanizing, spiritually expansive education are people who are gonna run hedge funds and major corporations.
Okay, look, my number one priority would be that there are no hedge funds. No, sorry.
Stop.
No. This is in a relative hierarchy. In a relative hierarchy. Okay. When it comes to hedge funds, my number one would be there are no hedge funds. My number two is if they're going to be hedge funds, I would rather the hedge fund managers have read Dante. But I also don't think about it globally in that way. Most of the time I'm thinking about my students and the alternative between giving them one kind of education that is more narrow and professionalized and another kind of education that is more directed toward those broader questions that they can ask for themselves and hopefully continue to ask as, when they leave my class. And they may not remember much of what they experienced in any given class, but my sense is that at least this worked on me, that thinking broadly about art and literature and philosophy and mathematics and physics too, and linguistics and all the things that I studied, worlds were opened to me that I was blind to until someone showed me, here's a path into thinking about human life and human existence. And it gives you a kind of joy in the world. That's the best case.
Joy in the world. Totally. But
so
then
that's the personal case. That's the personal benefit.
Okay, I see that. But I guess I'm just thinking, there's all these articles right now. I mean, and people have been talking about this forever. Bemoaning, I guess specifically in light of AI, bemoaning that kids don't know how to read anymore. Right?
Yeah, there's that Atlantic piece.
Were you telling me about that?
Elite students at elite colleges don't read books.
This is why the problem, I don't know where I get any of my information from, but it's sometimes correct. So yes, students at elite colleges don't read books. So there's like this whole uproar about how the learning how to read is going to be like lost as an art. We don't have kids don't have the attention spans for it anymore, all of these things. But then I think about like oral traditions we're completely lost in, I mean, I don't know what the percentages, but I mean, there are some parts of the world that still operate on oral tradition, but it is greatly reduced, right? But like who was it? Gutenberg?
Yeah. Printing press.
Printing press, like many aspects of the oral tradition were lost. And, you know, as you think about that, like people used to be able to recite what?
My parents can recite tons of poetry. It's kind of, I mean, it's just gone out of education.
It's gone out of education. But it's like, but none of us are walking around saying like, oh God, it's just so sad that now the kids can't recite all of the Odyssey from memory. Like, what is our culture going to do? What are we going to be? Like, clearly, like these abilities have been lost. I know it wasn't, okay, so a kid would be able to cite significant portions of the Odyssey, not the whole thing. That was like a professional would do that. I get that, whatever, to split hairs. But like, we don't bemoan that loss of a type of knowledge. It's just passed away out of this world. And so I wonder, like, is it such a great sin if reading also becomes a thing of the past that is no longer operational for the majority of individuals?
It's important to consider that argument. I guess there's a certain public culture that depends on literacy, that depends on argument and debate. Mm-hmm. That was a great achievement of the 19th century, mm-hmm. that the project of building liberal democracies
with public education
mm-hmm. being provided, and also things like the mechanics institutes and, you know, night education for adults. The thing is, it wasn't just about changing the educational system for children, but really making it possible for people to get to become literate and to become members of this, what had formerly been this aristocratic club. That is partly responsible for a certain kind of public culture. And I'm not going to attribute all of the virtues of that public culture just to this fact, but it seems to me that we have no hope of maintaining that set of practices around, for instance, respecting ordinary citizens and seeing them as not just people,
plebes to be passed over,
or you know, where we mold public opinion from the outside because there's this kind of great unwashed mass of people, and of course
the basket of deplorables.
Yeah, we need to keep them from rising up, and so we need to content them in certain ways. And there was for a time the idea that no, like if you want to be a political candidate, you would go out and address people and make arguments and make a case to them in ways that they were going to be able to appreciate because they had enough of this kind of education to participate in that. And I really think that's one of the things that goes out the door if everyone has a 15-second attention span and is just scrolling TikTok. Like, I don't think the alternatives are TikTok or Dante. Mm-hmm.
You could read Sally Rooney sometimes, which is like
that is
close to TikTok. No, I'm kidding.
That is acceptable to me. I haven't read Sally Rooney, so I don't know. But it does encourage me when I get on the subway and I see like one or two people with Sally Rooney. Or, you know, we live on the Upper West Side. So sometimes they just have Dante. Mm-hmm. And that's great. But most of the time you just see people scrolling mindlessly.
I know, but I guess I'm feeling contrary.
I'm not saying the future of democracy depends on people not
using
doing
their
that.
Phones.
But
it's much easier to be in bondage to a social system that is not serving you or others when you're addicted to a telephone.
When you're addicted to a telephone and you're getting a simulacrum of arguments and ideas. The point is, on TikTok, there's a lot of political content, there's a lot of influencers, but you're not getting something accessible, even as accessible as a 900-word New York Times op-ed, which is not some kind of magnificent achievement of civilization. You know, we shouldn't pride ourselves on getting to the end of one of these things. But it seems like the written word does allow for forms of reflection that oral communication doesn't, and maybe vice versa. We did lose something in the loss of an oral culture, but it seems to me now what we have is video culture that has none of the virtues of either of those.
And what if it becomes a video culture where even every video can be manipulated by AI? So Correct. Video, I think we trust because it has like it's representative of the truth. And so what if even that becomes completely discernible? from fantasy. Yeah, it's disturbing. I don't watch revenge porn, but I've heard that the medium has exploded now with AI because you can. This is so yikesy. I mean, it's so popular. There must be people who are watching it. This is the other thing is like if the market is creating certain things, there's clearly
That's
a
just
demographic.
so horrifying to contemplate.
Yeah, but actually, in some ways, I find the concept that AI could create any video ever as like kind of freeing, because then it like absents you from any responsibility that maybe any video could catch of you. You know, which is, guess, as somebody who has been on television for money, I guess that I should be discouraged by that, but I'm not. But I think I have an impersonal experience with a lot of things that people would have more personal. Like I had someone tattooed my face on their arm, and I felt,
oh my Lord,
I felt really good about that. Like not disturbed. I didn't think about it that much.
But was it your face or was it your embodiment of a character?
It was okay. Yeah, so it was.
That's still your face, to be clear. But
it is distinctively my face playing a character. And I remember, I'm sure I've talked about this also, because Sarah used to always tell me when I was repeating myself. So I'm sorry, you guys. I can't remember if I talked about this or not. But that I used to tutor this like, maybe this is incidental, but I'm just going to say it anyway. This like super autistic teenager who is kind of running their whole family's household just by, it was like Bartleby the Scrivener, basically refused to do anything and therefore ran the entire household through negation. It was kind of incredible. So I was supposed to be there to like tutor this kid who had zero interest in anything I had to say. But anyway, that I was tutoring them right when the character I was playing on this TV show Gotham was like starting to pop off and become a fan favorite, and people had started making super cuts of my footage, which I didn't even know what that term meant. It just means like every time that I'm in it, and then they would put like words and music and hearts on it, and I was really freaked out. And I remember this kid that I was tutoring looked at me and they were like, "It's just the IP. It has nothing to do with you. It's not personal." You know, and like that moment blew this whole thing open for me, because there I was in like the fallacy of ego, thinking that everybody was making super cuts of me because they liked me, and I was scared. But it was like I was just a vessel. I was an
Not
empty
entirely.
vessel for DC's content, you know.
well, you were a canvas, but
A canvas.
unlike an actual literal canvas, like your life is behind that. Your
Is it
person is
though?
behind
How
that.
is a canvas? I mean, we can't maybe see on the white, unpainted, stretched canvas all the sort of differentiations of the fabric and where the wood came from. But I would say that if the canvas were to argue with you, the canvas might say, "I am informed too by my background."
I agree. So if it's true of the canvas, it's all the more true of what appears to be, although maybe this is all a simulation, a real life person sitting across from me.
Person.
Are you just an AI?
No, God, can you imagine? But I was trying to. No, I haven't watched any AI stuff, mostly from indifference.
There was okay, here's a confession.
Yeah.
I am a sports fan.
Oh, wait, how have we not talked about this?
Specifically, however, I'm a fan of cricket.
Okay, I was like, this is going to be some obscure sport
It is
that
not
we're
obscure.
talking about.
It is played
okay, obscure
popular
in
with
this
billions
country,
of people.
In this country.
The T20 World Cup was partly played in the United States just last
Really?
year. Anyway, yes.
Does this have a flat bat?
Yes. Flat bat. And unlike the child's game baseball, it is played in 360 degrees. So actually a lot of it is strategy about field placement, because you only got 11 guys.
How do you watch it?
There are cameras.
No.
Or you're sitting there watching it.
The playing field is like a circle?
It's an oval, usually, yeah.
Oval. Where's home plate?
They run back and forth in a cut strip in the middle, and there's an outer boundary, and they're trying to score by hitting the ball away from the fielders. But unlike baseball, where the fielders have to be in the same spot, so you can teach it to very small children. With cricket,
you really have a lot of disdain for baseball.
No, baseball's fine. But I look,
I don't care. I like American football.
Yeah,
so.
but look, cricket is a great sport. But I was just watching the England versus Australia, which is happening in Australia right now, and there were ads on the feed, and it was an ad about some kind of online gambling thing, and so I already wanted to mute it. But I realized after the 10th or 12th time that the ad came up,
Yeah.
that all of the images in the ad were AI. You could tell because the hair of the main actor was not real. Like it didn't
Hair is always what ends everything. Hair's the
but
most
also like
difficult
there were
thing.
fake wrinkles on the face, and he was supposed to be this older guy.
Yeah.
And I realized that they're selling something through the phone where it tells you can make money with your phone, and instead of even getting a human to sell it to you, now it is being sold to you by this AI image of a human. And I thought, I am, in the ad break between overs of this cricket match, I am watching the end of culture. I felt kind of despondent.
So you don't love like memes? You don't feel like that is a good substitute for culture? I mean, clearly you're the wrong person to be talking to about
the wrong
this.
audience.
Since,
I mean, I like a good meme, and you just described how you became a meme
on somebody's body,
right?
I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. Actually, people would make memes of me, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, I think anyway. You can take all the credit in the world for all of that.
For my own memes or for the end of culture?
Depends on what we're doing here.
I'm literally not going to take any credit for the end of culture.
No, you're a good Luddite.
I'm being challenged though in my stance. I have a lot of people convincing me I need to get rid of this gorgeous piece of machinery right here, which if you're just listening is a MacBook Air from 15 years ago.
Is that like a 10-inch screen? 11-inch
I think
screen?
it's 12.
Cool.
It's all the screen a girl would need.
It's cute.
You know what I mean?
Cute.
It's perfect, but I get a lot of shit. It's pretty dirty. No, I would be living I used to, if left to my true druthers, where is my typewriter? I used to write on my grandfather's Olivetti typewriter because he was a door-to-door Olivetti salesman.
That's beautiful.
I know, right?
I love my grandfather's typewriter, and he was retired when we would visit him in India as my father's father, and I'd always, the ribbon still worked, so I could
They're very
away at them.
finicky, though.
Yes, I learned that you can't type quickly on them.
And now, if you want to get yours repaired in New York City, like a decade ago, they would charge you like $400 just for a little tune-up. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The cost of maintaining your Luddite innocence stance is high. It's like it is technological rejection for the 1%.
I thought about getting a light phone. Have you heard about these?
I looked into it extensively.
The new light phone is like $699, which is a lot more than I paid for my iPhone SE.
Well, they just make you think that, but they really are tacking on a component of it to your every bill.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Sorry. I know it feels that there's all those commercials. They're like, you get a free iPhone. It's like,
no,
bitch,
I think I bought mine outright. I think I bought mine outright.
Really?
I have this.
I mean, you could have
found. I got this old iPhone SE.
You could have the miracle deal. Look,
but anyway,
there's no free
But my
lunch.
point is, I think, well, I'm becoming more radicalized in this direction, and
towards being a Luddite.
Yeah, I'm working on my new book, longhand and notebooks. I'm writing my book on with.
That's beautiful. You're not
pen and
left-handed.
paper. No, I'm right-handed.
Pity the left-handed person with the wrong kind of pen. You know what I mean?
Can't you just learn Hebrew?
Yeah, totally.
That's the solution.
I remember when I was really tired when I was pregnant, I knew I was really in a bad place because I would open my books to read and I would start reading them, which for us would be backwards as if they were in Hebrew. And it would like take me a little while to register that.
Oof.
And that's when I knew that cognitive functioning that they talk about women losing with pregnancy was real. But it seems like a cool way to do things.
Yeah. It's good for the left hand.
Which I feel like we should take a short break for a second. And then I think we should take this Hebrew segue into our topic. How does that feel?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So we will be right back.